Hi, what's happening, y'all? It's your boy Rico from StreetScores, and we have a few things to talk about today. Most notably, Washington being one of the three teams that may be targeting Ravens left tackle Ronnie Stanley. We need to do a whole breakdown of this offensive line situation and why Ronnie Stanley makes more sense at left tackle rather than another offensive lineman in free agency at guard or something like that. Should we keep Brandon Coleman at left tackle or should we move him to guard? Also, we have some free agency outline rumors to go around as well. John Kahn brought up a lot of good points. We need to dive into something, and this is from a few days ago, so we're going to dive into things that have already happened, that will not happen, that may happen. We're just going to go through every checklist of that. Also, we're going to take a look at some backup quarterback options because it's quite likely we lose Marcus Mariota with guys like Geno Smith getting traded for third-round picks. But before we get into everything, you already know this video is sponsored by BetUS Sportsbook and Casino. And before we dive into everything else, make sure you stiff arm that like button, stiff arm the subscription button, and stiff arm the bell next to that subscription button so you get notification each and every time I release an informative and opinion video just like this one. Be on the lookout for more Commanders content. Again, any rumors, any reports, I got y'all updated, man. I'm already working on a video that's going to break down should we target Evan Ingram, Harold Landry, and maybe even a Darius Slayton in free agency. So be on the lookout for that. I'll probably put that one out there later this evening. So be on the lookout for that. I'm still working on my post Deebo Samuel mock offseason, mock draft, all of that type of stuff. Definitely need to get that done before we move into actual, like, the legal tampering period, which starts Monday. So definitely need to have that before then. And without further ado, let's go and dive into this video right now, man. Let's get it. Adam. All right, so let's start with Ronnie Stanley. And first of all, there was a report from Deanna Rossini that the Commanders are a team to watch as they are, quote, trying to beef up their offensive line, unquote. Again, that's from Deanna Rossini, so it apparently looks like the Commanders are going to do whatever it takes to make sure their offensive line is better in 2025 than it was in 2024. You also got to remember the fact that Samuel Cosmi is hurt. Just got ACL surgery earlier this year. Like this calendar year, 2025. Like, so we're not even sure if he'll be ready week one, let alone like training camp practices, preseason and things like that. So we'll see how that goes. But yeah, I agree that Deanna Rossini, I mean, I'm not exactly sure what his sources are, but I agree that the Commanders should at least focus on upgrading their trenches on both sides of the ball. Offensive line, defensive line, edge rusher, defensive tackle, left tackle, guard, whatever you need to do, upgrade the trenches. We saw from what the Eagles just did this past season, dominating the NFL, and that was primarily with the trenches. They don't have an elite quarterback. They have really good, arguably elite skill positions, but the reason that they dominated games this season and really dominated the entire season and especially dominated the Super Bowl, that was because they had arguably the best offensive line in football and literally had the best defensive line in football. I mean, you know, that's what happens when you draft a bunch of Georgia Bulldogs, you know, I'm just saying. But either way, if the Commanders want to go to the next step, because think about it, what are our expectations going into 2025? We just went to an NFC Championship in year one of a rebuild. It's honestly at least go to a Super Bowl or bust this season, right? I mean, honestly, based off of the standards that we set last year, what can we do to improve this year? You're assuming every year you're trying to improve. The only way to improve is to at least win the NFC Championship game, go to a Super Bowl. Well, to do that, you're going to have to go through the Eagles. You have to play them twice a season in the regular season alone, let alone the time you're more than likely gonna have to run into them in the playoffs if you're trying to get to Super Bowl. The NFC goes through the Eagles right now. To be able to beat them, to be better than them, you have to improve the trenches. Now, granted, it will probably take a couple of years of us getting better and the Eagles getting worse, you know, them losing certain players to, you know, guys wanting to leave to go get more money elsewhere for us to eventually pass them as like a better team top to bottom, roster wise, talent wise, and things like that. That'll probably take a couple of years. But Jaden Daniels is such an elite quarterback that maybe the gap between him and Jalen Hurts is big enough to where you only need to improve the rest of the team a certain amount. Like if you take away quarterback, again, I think it will be like a few years before we're better than the Eagles, excluding quarterback. I think Jaden Daniels is a big enough difference maker to where we can beat the Eagles on the way to the Super Bowl next year just off of Jaden Daniels as a top 5 quarterback, and then the team around him was just at least better than what it was in 2024. And shouts out to us going to get Deebo Samuel at wide receiver because he's already better than any receiver we had last year outside of Terry McLaurin, easily without question. And then we're probably going to even bring some of the guys back from last year. Like there's rumors that we may bring back Noah Brown and Olamide Zaccheaus. We're going to dive into that later in the video. But my point is, we need to do whatever it takes to make this team better and to basically put Jaden Daniels in position to do what he needs to do. He's the difference maker. He's the gap closer. Again, it's going to be a few years before we're as good as the Eagles outside of quarterback, but I believe Jaden Daniels, if we just give him just enough to work with, he is enough of a difference maker that he can take us to the Super Bowl himself. And you start with the offensive line. Now, like I've said before, for the past few weeks, really, I don't feel like offensive line is like one of our very biggest weaknesses out of our entire team and roster and things like that. But it's arguably our biggest need for improvement because Jaden Daniels is your biggest asset on this team. I mean, not only is he a quarterback and a great quarterback, but like it's Jaden Daniels. You need to do whatever you can to make sure the offensive line blocking for him is mistake free as possible. Like it has to be. So again, I don't feel like our offensive line is like one of the worst. Like if you're ranking our different position groups and compare them to the other teams in the NFL at their respective position groups, I don't feel like our offensive line is like one of our worst position groups. But at the same time, you got to do whatever you got to do to make sure it's as great as possible because Jaden Daniels is more important than anything else. I feel like defensive line is a way bigger need. I feel like we need an RB1 more. I feel like we need corner more. But offensive line needs to be one of our priorities just simply because that's the direct defense for edge rushers coming after Jaden Daniels. For defensive line's defense is coming after Jaden Daniels, and he is your top priority. So do whatever you got to do to protect your top priority. And so again, Deanna Rossini said that the Commanders are one of the teams to watch as they're trying to beef up their offensive line. So apparently the Commanders already know and acknowledge, hey man, we need to make this offensive line better than what it currently is right now. And then later on that same day, you had Albert Breer, completely unrelated, saying that the Commanders are one of 3 teams expected to be in the market for left tackle Ronnie Stanley. And just to let you know, this came from like a Patriots YouTube video. Like he was interviewing with like a Patriots reporter or something like that. And he was talking about how Ronnie Stanley makes a lot of sense for them. But at the same time, expect the Commanders to be involved in the Ronnie Stanley market as well. Again, this had nothing to do with the Commanders. The discussion had nothing to do with us. And this had nothing to do with what Deanna Rossini reported that we just broke down. This was entirely separate. That's why I feel like this is probably true, because there's just a lot of smoke around the Commanders want offensive line help. There's a lot of smoke around the Commanders being attached to Ronnie Stanley, even again on a Patriots YouTube video, which takes us back to the discussion of what the Commanders really want to do as far as the offensive line goes. Again, Deanna Rossini just let us know that we clearly want to upgrade the offensive line. How do we plan on going about that? Because we've had discussions and debates about how they should go about improving the offensive line, especially with Samuel Cosmi just getting ACL surgery earlier this year. But the main point of emphasis on improving the offensive line centers around and starts with, should we move Brandon Coleman to left guard and then get a new left tackle, or keep Brandon Coleman at left tackle and maybe potentially upgrade left guard over Nick Allegretti? Those are basically the debates. And when you're talking about improving the offensive line, you're good at center. Samuel Cosmi, when healthy, you're good at right guard. And then there's some debates about right tackle, but we're not worried about that right now. We're more so focused on that left side of the offensive line. Do we improve left guard or do we improve left tackle? Well, Commanders general manager Adam Peters at the NFL Combine just last week spoke on Brandon Coleman. He said, quote, "We're really excited about his future," unquote. But he did not specify that Brandon Coleman is a future left tackle or left guard or either one. Not saying that Adam Peters omitted, mentioning him as a left tackle on purpose, but he didn't say it. And for the purpose of this video and the fact that Albert Breer is connecting this to Ronnie Stanley, I'm assuming that we may move Brandon Coleman to left guard like a lot of us want to do. And again, like I've been saying for weeks now, it's not because I feel like Brandon Coleman can't play left tackle. It's more so because if you want your best combination of 5 offensive linemen on the field at the same time, if you want your 5 most talented guys out there on the field any given snap, then that means that Nick Allegretti, who is solid, shouldn't be starting at left guard. He's a really good backup, but like a below average starter. It's more so about what Nick Allegretti can't do than what Brandon Coleman can't do at left tackle. So move Coleman to left guard because Ronnie Stanley is better at left tackle than Allegretti is at left guard. Brandon Coleman is the guy that's getting moved around and is in the middle of these discussions, but it's not really because of what he can and can't do. It's more so a Nick Allegretti thing. And just be thankful that Brandon Coleman is even that versatile. And I also feel like Brandon Coleman has a higher ceiling at guard as well. Like with Coleman, the debate since we drafted him has always been higher value versus higher ceiling, at least for me. Internally, by myself, I felt like should Brandon Coleman play left tackle or left guard? It's a debate within myself, higher value or higher ceiling, because left tackle is the more premium position than left guard, of course. And if you have a guy that's at least good at left tackle, then put that guy at left tackle because it's hard to find left tackles. It's easier to find a quality left guard than a quality left tackle. But at the same time, based off of Coleman's measurements, his testing skills, even his tape back in college, they all scream elite left guard to me compared to good left tackle. I think he could eventually become a good to really good left tackle. I think he has the potential to be an elite Pro Bowl level, maybe even arguably all pro ceiling left guard. I don't really see all pro or Pro Bowl ceiling left tackle in him. And then on top of all that, especially with the free agency class, what we even have available to us offensive line wise, with I guess the only guard equivalent to a Ronnie Stanley at left tackle would be Trey Smith at guard. He's going to be way more expensive than a Ronnie Stanley would be. So it's basically far easier and more cost efficient to upgrade left tackle with Ronnie Stanley than it would be to upgrade left guard with a free agent guard out there, because it's Trey Smith and then just other guys at guard. Like I do not like this guard free agency pool right now. As far as free agency goes, maybe in the draft I'm cool with guard, but free agency, nah. If you're gonna upgrade offensive line through free agency, it's going to be a tackle. So even just off of Brandon Coleman himself, the fact that our bigger weakness is Nick Allegretti, just move Coleman there, and then the fact that it's easier to find a quality left tackle in free agency that won't charge you an arm and a leg versus a guard. I think it just makes so much sense to move Coleman to guard and then upgrade the left tackle position. That way, Nick Allegretti no longer has to start for you. He should be this team's Wes Schweitzer, not your starting left guard going into week 1. If he has to start due to injury, cool. Or maybe even he has to start over at right guard until Samuel Cosmi is fully healthy. Okay, that's perfectly fine with me. But let's go upgrade that offensive line. And I think the most cost efficient and effective way of doing it is getting Ronnie Stanley at left tackle and moving Brandon Coleman to left guard. And then John Comm, we're going to dive into this later in the video, but he did one of his podcast updates and he did like a whole list of like a free agency guide for the Commanders coming up in a couple of days. And this was a few days ago, but he said the team is not necessarily committed to Brandon Coleman at one spot or the other. So there you go. Perfect. The Commanders are not super duper stubborn on making sure they keep Brandon Coleman at left tackle. That's good to hear. They're open-minded. Not saying that they're definitely going to move him to guard, but at least they're considering their options of, okay, we can keep Brandon Coleman to left tackle and then upgrade the guard this way, or we can move Brandon Coleman to guard and upgrade tackle this way. At least they're considering all options. I'm happy with that. At least if they're acknowledging that, even if we don't go get Ronnie Stanley at left tackle and move Brandon Coleman to left guard, the fact that they at least considered it, I'm content with that enough. I mean, I love Coleman as a starter on the line in general, but Ronnie Stanley makes too much sense at left tackle, especially with his experience for blocking for an elite mobile quarterback in Lamar Jackson. It would be a seamless transition to come here and then block for Jaden Daniels. And don't forget, Ronnie Stanley was also considered one of the highest ceiling tackles in football before a series of bad injuries. Like, when we're just talking about pure talent coming out of college and things like that, his ceiling was crazy high and he was showing flashes of it. And then with the severe injuries, then it took him another year or two even after those injuries to fully recover and get back to his old self. And then it looks like last year versus Baltimore, that was the first time we've seen the real Ronnie Stanley in like 4 or 5 years. I mean, he finally started to look like the Ronnie Stanley that we used to know and that we expected of him. So I want to get him while he's back on the path of becoming elite again. You know, he got set back like maybe 4 or 5 years, but now he's right back on track to being one of the better left tackles in the NFL. Or even, I mean, Even if he doesn't just go from 2024 Ronnie Stanley and then continue that trajectory to get better. If you just gave me 2024 Ronnie Stanley and 2025 on the Commanders and that's it, that's his ceiling, that's the best he's ever going to be, I would still love to have that. Shouts out to Pro Football Focus. They have their whole free agency breakdown, like their top free agents, how much money they expect them to get and everything like that. They have Ronnie Stanley ranked as their #1 offensive tackle, their #8 player available out of all free agency regardless of position. He is 31 years old by the time like we start training camp and things like that. They're expecting him to get a 2-year, $20 million per year contract. I'm willing to do that. And they also said it's hard to argue that any player improved their free agency stock more this past season than Ravens left tackle. After a devastating injury in 2021 seemed to stall his career, Ronnie Stanley was back at top form in 2024. It took him a while, but he's back though. I'm telling you, go look at the tape. Posting an impressive 79.6 Pro Football Focus pass blocking grade through the first 12 weeks. Sign me up any day for a Ronnie Stanley, please. Now, before we move on to the second half of this video and talk about Khalil Mack, talk about some of like John Combs free agency outlines and things like that, backup quarterback options, before we get there, you already know, man, this show is provided by BetUS Sportsbook and Casino, and if you're looking for a new sportsbook, it should be BetUS for sure. And first of all, they have the fastest payouts in the industry. I know y'all want y'all money fast, and right now, BetUS is offering you a 150% sign-up bonus on your first deposit and a 125% sign-up bonus on your next 2 deposits for up to $2,000 with code YouTube150. That's YOUTUBE150, and they have a fast and easy deposit and withdrawal process as well, so it's really like, why not? Now let's take a look at some bets that we can get into directly through their website. And now it only makes sense that we dive into some free agency stuff, and then also, since we're already going to talk about Khalil Mack, let's dive into that as well. Well, according to BetUS, directly through their website, right now the Commanders have plus 600 odds to land Khalil Mack in free agency if he doesn't go back to the Chargers. And again, right after this, we're going to talk about the fact that the Commanders reportedly have interest in Khalil Mack, and that's all I needed to hear. As a big Khalil Mack fan, as a guy that really wants the Commanders to sign Khalil Mack in free agency, that's all I needed. Right now, we have the 5th highest odds with the Chicago Bears and Philadelphia Eagles tied for first. Do not let Khalil Mack go to either one of those teams. Both of those fan bases hate us and think about us more than we think about them. They would be insufferable with a guy like Khalil Mack, because I'm telling you right now, he still has some juice left in him. We're going to talk about him very soon. Then you have the Detroit Lions, then you have the Kansas City Chiefs, and then you finally get to us, the Commanders, at plus 600 odds. And if you wanted to put money down on that, say you put down $10, you can win $60 if the Commanders do end up getting Khalil Mack. And once I hear the Commanders are interested in somebody, I think it's quite likely that we get them. Like Christian Kirk, I felt like it made too much sense, but there was never a report that, oh, the Commanders want Christian Kirk. So I'm not surprised that happened. There were reports that the Commanders wanted Deebo Samuel. You saw how that went. There were reports that the Commanders wanted to trade for Marshawn Lattimore. You saw how that went. Now there's reports that the Commanders are potentially interested in Khalil Mack. I don't know, man. This may be one of the ones, but at the same time, I'm always going to scream at y'all to please gamble responsibly. And again, before we get right back to this video, right now, BetUS is offering you a 150% sign-up bonus on your first deposit and a 125% sign-up bonus on your next 2 deposits for up to $2,000 with code YouTube150. And again, if you don't do nothing else, please make sure you gamble responsibly. Now let's get to my favorite part of this video. Again, y'all already know I'm a huge Khalil Mack fan. Like, I am an avid Commanders go get Khalil Mack and pay him almost whatever he wants type of guy right now. I feel like we need edge rushers so bad. Even if you were to trade for Trey Hendrickson, still go get me Khalil Mack. That's how badly I want to upgrade this defensive line, and we have so much cap space to do it. According to Over the Cap, we're 4th in cap space. According to Spot Track, we're 2nd in cap space because they have it to where we're only paying Deebo Samuel a $5 million cap hit in 2025. So either way, no matter which way you look at it, we have at worst the 4th most cap space in the NFL. Why not use it? The Eagles still find a way to sign all of their guys long term. They find a way cap space wise to make it happen. We brought over Brandon Sosna for that exact reason. Adam Peters is an elite scout guy, and Brandon Sosna is the elite contract finesser. We have both of these guys in our front office make it happen. So that's how I feel like we need to treat the edge rusher position. And right now, without Trey Hendrickson in the bag, without the fact that we've already traded for him, even though I hope we do, Khalil Mack just seems too obvious for us, especially on maybe like a 1 or 2 year deal. And so Ben Standig himself reported that the Commanders are interested in defensive end Khalil Mack. I'm not exactly sure who his sources are. I don't know who he's talked to, because Adam Peters does a great job of not letting things leak out. but I don't know. Maybe Ben Standig heard something in passing from somebody maybe close to Adam Peters, but not Adam Peters himself. Either way, I want to believe this. I'm not going to sit here and act like this is like a super trustworthy source right here, but I believe it because I also really agree. Just like, the same feeling that I got from Marshawn Lattimore to the Commanders makes too much sense. With what he wants, what the Commanders need, all of that is just a match made in heaven. And then we had no formal reports about Commanders, Marshawn Lattimore, attachment, anything like that. I was just saying it made too much sense. A lot of us were saying it. It was so obvious. There were so many of us that were literally saying that this makes too much sense. It should happen. Why wouldn't it happen? And then it happened. Then same thing with Deebo Samuel. We were getting reports that the Commanders are going to end up with either Deebo Samuel or Cooper Kupp. More than likely Deebo Samuel. It happened. Now you're starting to hear and feel the same thing about Khalil Mack. I'm feeling the same thing slightly about Trey Hendrickson as well, like I've already explained yesterday. So be on the lookout, man. Khalil Mack to the Commanders? Maybe. The only reason I doubt it happens is because the Chargers already released Joey Bosa. And then, are you going to let Khalil Mack leave in free agency as well? Now you'll just have two holes on the edge rusher part of your defense. And so I don't know that's the only reason I doubt it. But if the Chargers are okay with Khalil Mack leaving, I feel like the Commanders should be the number one landing spot. We need edge rusher arguably more than any other team in the NFL right now. I can't think of another team in the NFL that needs edge rusher more than us, especially when you're thinking out of all of the contenders. Like maybe there are teams out there that their whole entire rosters are worse, but they're not contending for Super Bowls. They're probably going to try to get an edge rusher in the draft. We may need to do the same thing. But at the same time, out of all contenders, teams that are trying to win right now that need an edge rusher, I would argue we need edge rusher the most between our timeline and also the hole that we have, and especially a run-stopping edge rusher. I think we need to make that happen. And shouts out to Pro Football Focus again. With their top free agency list, they have Khalil Mack ranked 5th, and as their number one edge rusher over Josh Sweat, Hassan Reddick, Malcolm Kunsey, Baron Browning, that Dayo kid from the Indianapolis Colts, Chase Young, Azeez Ojulari, DeMarcus Lawrence we've been attached to, even Dante Fowler, who I feel like we're going to re-sign, even if I feel like you trade for Trey Hendrickson, sign Khalil Mack, you still re-sign Dante Fowler as a situational pass rusher. I agree. I just don't feel like we have enough run-stopping edge setting right now. We just do not. That's our main problem. Getting after the quarterback was a slight issue, but, at least we had something going on there. We didn't have anything setting the edge and stopping the run on the outside for us last year. That's why our run defense was so horrible. It's only so much that Bobby Wagner and Frankie Louvu can do. So Khalil Mack, at the very least, is that. You can argue that maybe he had a down year sack-wise, even though his pressures disagree. Like, he was still 26th in pressures last year, 22nd in hurries and everything like that. And then technically he only had some people say he had 5. Pro Football Focus, their stats get weird. They credited him with 7 sacks. But either way, it was a down year for sacks for him compared to a guy that normally gets 15 to 17 a year. But at the same time, this guy still had an 88 rush grade from Pro Football Focus. And I went and watched the tape. I agree. They felt like he was the second best run-stopping, edge-setting edge rusher in the entire NFL just this past season. We're not talking about prime Khalil Mack. We're talking about this past year. He still has it at the very least at a certain thing that arguably is our biggest weakness on the entire team. We could argue as far as weaknesses go, if we just ignore positions, we're just talking about very specific things. We really need a home run hitting running back. We need to improve the offensive line in general. I feel like arguably left tackle. And then we need to stop the run better, especially on the edge. Every running back was able to bounce it out to the edge anytime they wanted. Derrick Henry when we played the Ravens, Saquon Barkley when we played the Eagles every time, Jahmyr Gibbs when we played the Lions, even Bijan Robinson when we played the Falcons. They always took runs to the outside. It's only but so much Bobby Wagner and Frankie Louvu could do. You could argue that one of our 3 biggest specific weaknesses on the team was stopping the run and edge setting on the outside of the defensive line. And Khalil Mack, at the very least, is still arguably the best player in the NFL at that. And they felt like his overall grade was still 5th out of all edge rushers with a 90.4. And they felt like his pass rushing at worst was 16th out of all edge rushers in the NFL. And that's still better than anything we had last year. Khalil Mack will be better than anything we had last year in our edge rusher group, period. Even better than Dante Fowler, even better than Dorrance Armstrong. But at the same time, at the very least, you're improving mightily. Leaps and bounds better when it comes to run stopping. You'll improve slightly pass rush wise, which I'm happy about as well. But run stopping, huge hole filled by bringing in Khalil Mack. I mean, Pro Football Focus even projects him to get a 2-year, $22.5 million deal per year, which is like $40 million guaranteed, which means he'll be like on a 2-year deal, $20 million against the cap each season. I'd do that. I feel like you could probably even get him for slightly cheaper than that, but I'd still do that. And Pro Football Focus also said Mack has enjoyed a late career resurgence over the past 2 seasons, proving he can still be a force as a pass rusher and run defender. His 88 quarterback pressures in 2023 marked his highest total since 2016. This was just 2 years ago. Like, it's not like he's just falling off of a cliff. And his 86.3 Pro Football Focus pass rushing grade was his best since 2020. Mack's situation entering free agency is eerily reminiscent of Von Miller's back in 2022, as his 6-year, $120 million contract with the Buffalo Bills was more like 3 years and $52.5 million in reality, which is a pretty good point. But also, I want to add to the fact that, yeah, you're worried about him being 34 years old, right? But Zach Ertz, when we signed him, most of the fan base was like, why would we sign this injury-prone, Zach Ertz that's barely gonna play? He's not gonna offer much. We need to go tight end first round because we don't trust Zach Ertz or anything like that, right? That's what it was. Then Zach Ertz went on to not only play 20 games, all 20 games all season, but then he also was our second leading receiver, only outside of Terry McLaurin, number 1, Zach Ertz right there behind him, number 2. And then Bobby Wagner played 99% of our snaps last year. I don't know what this medical staff, coaching staff, physical therapy staff, whatever it is, whatever they're doing, Fountain of Youth, maybe they're cheating or something, but whatever they're doing, they're taking guys that are past their prime and still getting almost near prime production out of these guys. I don't see why we would stop with Khalil Mack, who was just arguably the best run-stopping edge rusher just this past season. We're not talking about 4 or 5 years ago, just this past season. And still, I feel like a top 10 pass rushing quarterback edge rusher out of the entire NFL. So I just feel, and again, we're talking about just last season. If it could work with Zach Ertz, Bobby Wagner, and a few other guys that we brought in, why would it not work with Khalil Mack? So please give me Khalil Mack any day of the week. Yes, sir. And then also comparing Khalil Mack's projected $20 million per year against the cap, just to let you know, Trey Hendrickson is making $21 million per year right now. That's more than Khalil Mack. That's my point here. And Trey Hendrickson is trying to leave the Bengals because he feels like that's way too little. Bradley Chubb is making $22 million per year. Rashawn Gary's making $24. Montez Sweat is making $24.5 per year. Daniil Hunter's making $24.5. Myles Garrett is only making $25. He's about to hit and make like $35 a year or more. TJ Watt's making $28. Brian Burns making $28. Josh Hines Allen making $28. Nick Bosa's making $34. And then Max Crosby just signed a deal to make $35.5. If you can get Khalil Mack for $20 million, which is less per year than all of those names that I just read to you, I feel like that's a steal in free agency. I feel like that's a home run signing, but that's just me. I know a lot of y'all disagree, but I'm standing firm. I would love Khalil Mack. And to hear that the Commanders are interested in Khalil Mack is my favorite part of this whole video. That's some of my favorite news I've heard all of free agency. It sounds like, because even if we don't get Khalil Mack, it sounds like we're at the very least very serious about improving our edge rusher situation. Again, like I said, I'd trade for Trey Hendrickson, sign Khalil Mack, and maybe even draft an edge rusher in the first round. That's how bad this edge rusher group is to me personally, and I feel like that's what's really stopping us from being able to beat a team like the Eagles. So do whatever you got to do to fix that. The offensive line, the defensive line, the trenches in general, talking about Ronnie. Give me Ronnie Stanley and Khalil Mack. I'm a happy camper leaving free agency. I'm pretty sure we would do more than that. I'm pretty sure we're trying to get like a Travarius Ward at corner as well. But you give me Ronnie Stanley and Khalil Mack in free agency, and I'm happy just off of that alone. So please do that. Now moving on, again, John Com had his podcast a few days ago. Shouts out to Jay Daniels MVP for basically outlining everything that he said in the video. I don't want to steal his content, so we're gonna like fly through this without giving too much detail, but basically, John Com said, receiver-wise, sounds like we expect to re-sign Noah Brown, Olamide Zaccheaus, and maybe even Jamison Crowder as well. But at the same time, it's more than likely that Dyami Brown will test the market, and he may get something more than what Washington is willing to pay. So don't expect Dyami Brown back, but Noah Brown and Olamide Zaccheaus makes sense, and maybe even Jamison Crowder, especially as like a slot guy, until we find another slot, like maybe a Cooper Kupp. Christian Kirk just got traded to the Texans, so we're out on him. Who knows? But Jamison Crowder is at the very least a pretty good punt returner, so I wouldn't be surprised there. He also said, receiver-wise, don't expect Washington to make a move for a big-name wide receiver like DK Metcalf or Devontae Adams. So Hey man, I would like Devontae Adams, but I don't want him as bad as I want Khalil Mack and Ronnie Stanley. We'll see. He also brought up Darius Slayton as a possible wide receiver for the team because he's a good locker room fit. We'll talk about that in another video. And then he also said Christian Kirk can still be an option for Cliff Kingsbury since he coached them and loved them. But again, this was a few days ago before Christian Kirk went to the Texans, so we're gonna move past that. He also said that he expects Bobby Wagner back and went on a whole spiel about why Bobby Wagner should come back. Again, this is a few days ago when John Com said this. Bobby Wagner's officially back. So a lot of these predictions are so far true. And then he also expects Zach Ertz to be back. Mutual interest from both sides, so be on the lookout for Zach Ertz coming back. It's more of a matter of when, in my opinion, than an if. I agree. And then we can see Jeremy Chin getting a multi-year deal. The team clearly wants him back. And just to let you know, I don't think that necessarily stops you from targeting Talanoa Hufanga. I think you can play with Quan Martin, Jeremy Chin, and Talanoa Hufanga on the field at the same time, especially if you want to utilize Jeremy Chin as like more of a box will linebacker type of guy. Talanoa Hufanga, your strong safety, and then Quan Martin, your free safety. I think that could work. Either way, the team would also like Jalen Holmes back at defensive line, so be on the lookout for that. But that's like a really cheap re-signing situation. That's not something that's like major headlining news. Also, the team wants John Bates back. That's interesting. Expected to have a market as his blocking stands out, but they do want him back. But if there is a market, he may get outpriced just like De'Ami Brown, to where we have a certain number we're willing to give him, and then if they want to go get more money, you can leave and go do that. But if you want to stay with the Commanders and continue to build on what we just did last year, then hey, you're just gonna have to take a slight pay cut compared to what other teams are offering you. We'll see. And then he also said that he expects Jonathan Allen to be cut, and again, that happened. So John Com is pretty spot on with some of these predictions that he broke down in this free agency. So now with all of the other things that he talked about, it makes you look at it a little bit differently. Okay, so maybe these things really will happen, because a lot of these things he said ended up happening even sooner than probably he expected. But also shouts out to @Washington today, because he brings up a good point about Marcus Mariota. He said Mariota is far and away my #1 preference for backup quarterback. He was great whenever he had to step in. He had a great relationship with Jaden Daniels and the perfect mentor and fit for the offense. I hate to even have to look at other options because I'm worried he goes to the Jets or the Raiders for a chance to start, which I'm definitely afraid of that being a thing. I would love to bring Marcus Mariota back, I agree, but I feel like he more than likely will take an opportunity to go somewhere else and try to start. Well, now that the Raiders traded for Seattle Seahawks quarterback Geno Smith, now you're looking at the Jets or maybe even the Seahawks as an option for Marcus Mariota to go be, maybe at least compete for a starting job. Even if he isn't given it immediately, at least that's an opportunity for him to go compete for a starting job, versus here, you already know Jaden Daniels is a starter and you would be the backup definitively, no question asked. And with that said, here are a few guys that catch my eye as the new backup. This is Washington today. He said Teddy Bridgewater. I could kind of see that from the mobility. Daniel Jones, even though maybe he'll end up with a starting job somewhere else. Jameis Winston, maybe he'll fight for a starting job somewhere else. And Zach Wilson may end up getting a starting job somewhere else as well. I saw a report recently, like earlier this morning, Zach Wilson was rumored to be trying to get a starting job somewhere. I forgot the team, but hey, these are all options out there. Let me know which quarterback you prefer to be our back. If Marcus Mariota eventually leaves us for a better opportunity and a better chance of starting for another team, even if he isn't named the day one starter, at least he gets a chance to compete for the starter position, which again, he will not be able to get here because Jaden Daniels is a definitive starter without question. Let me know which backup quarterbacks you're potentially looking at. I think that's a pretty decent list from Jordan @Washington today. I guess I would have to say out of that group of 4, Teddy Bridgewater, Daniel Jones, Jameis Winston, Zach Wilson. I guess Daniel Jones off of the athleticism, but he would have to come here extremely humble, super cheap. They had that guy playing safety and scout team practices last year for the Giants at some point. So I'm pretty sure his ego is way down. So Daniel Jones, just off of the youth and like his actual like talent and skill set, like the fact that he's a mobile quarterback and things like that, I think he would be a pretty decent backup to Jaden Daniels. I know some people were looking at Trey Lance since the Cowboys already said they're not bringing him back. So maybe Trey Lance is a backup. Let me know which one y'all prefer. But yeah, man, that's the end of this video. Please get in the comment section. Let me know if you feel about everything discussed in the video. Please still follow that like button, still follow the subscription button, still follow the bell next to that subscription button so you get notifications each and every time I release an informative and opinionated video just like this one. Let me know how you feel about everything discussed in the video. Of course, let me know how you feel about the whole Ronnie Stanley situation. Let me know how you feel about the whole offensive line situation. How would you fix it? Would you just leave Brady Coleman at left tackle and figure out how to upgrade left left guard in free agency or the draft? Or would you move Brandon Coleman to left guard like I would and try to get a Ronnie Stanley? Or maybe there's another tackle out there that you're eyeing in free agency or the draft. I don't like this draft talent, like this draft class at tackle, especially with us having the 29th pick. But let me know who you would get to as far as improving this offensive line. Or are you just okay with where the offensive line currently is right now without adding anybody? And then let me know how you feel about the whole Khalil Mack situation. Of course, let me know how you feel about the overall points that John Kahn provided from his podcast. And then let me know how you feel about our backup quarterback situation with Marcus Mariota quite likely to leave for a better opportunity elsewhere. So let me know how y'all feel about everything included in this video. Of course, make sure you leave a like on the way out. And also, remember this video is sponsored by BetUS Sportsbook and Casino. And if you if you don't do nothing else, make sure you gamble responsibly, man. If you don't do nothing else, please do that one. I'm going to catch y'all later. Appreciate y'all. Leave a like on the way out. Appreciate y'all. I'm out.